Hey guys, welcome to Study IQ. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting economic topic. We all know that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a negative impact on Indian economy, isn't it? We are looking at a huge slowdown in Indian economy. But in general, if we talk about India's growth trajectory since 2011, it has not been rather consistent. It has been rather haywire. You can see a lot of peaks and downfalls in Indian economic growth. Now, especially if you focus on 2016, since demonetization, there has been a rather downtrend, although there has been a small peak. But in FY19, financial year 19, we see that the growth rate was only 6%. Later on, in financial year 20, the growth rate was only 4.78%. That means, in general, we are looking at a economic slowdown in India. Why it is very problematic? We all know that economic growth is necessary for, in general, economic development and inclusive growth in India. But today we are going to connect this particular development where we are looking at an economic slowdown, lowering GDP growth rate, COVID-19 pandemic impact on Indian economy, with a very important concept from economy, the Great Gatsby curve. So, what would be the agenda for discussion today? We are going to talk about the Great Gatsby curve. What exactly is it, and how India is moving towards, or is India moving towards, the East Asian countries and Latin American countries on this Great Gatsby curve? And if India is moving, what are the repercussions of it? So we'll get all this interesting information. Stay tuned with me. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonkar. Let's begin the discussion and let's first understand the meaning of Great Gatsby curve. First of all, I'm quite sure in popular culture you must have heard of the name Great Gatsby. There is a movie called as The Great Gatsby. The lead actor is Leonardo DiCaprio. If you have seen that movie, you must remember that the lead actor DiCaprio, he comes from very humble backgrounds, and all of a sudden he becomes a big magnet, right? He becomes a high net worth individual, isn't it? Because of whatever factors. So our discussion is also related to something like that itself. The Great Gatsby curve, it basically gives a relationship between the income inequality in a population or in a nation connected to the intergenerational income mobility. Now, you saw in the movie that one generation, that means just the hero DiCaprio, suddenly he becomes a very big individual. That means he has moved from a low income group to a high income group, right? Meaning to the upper class. Does this happen in general in the economy? That is going to be point of our discussion. Now, in general, this Great Gatsby, the movie itself was inspired from the book written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And this concept of Gatsby curve, it was given by economist Alan Kruger in 2012. It is a relatively new concept. So let's understand what is this Great Gatsby curve. See, Great Gatsby curve, a typical Gatsby curve is shown here. It gives you a reading of inequality in a nation, which is given by the Gini index or the Gini coefficient, against the intergenerational immobility. I have written immobility. You can also write mobility here. After some time, I'll show you the mobility curve also. But before that, let's talk about this Gini coefficient. From exam perspective, it is very important, right? Now, what is the Gini coefficient? It gives you a measure of inequality in a nation. Now, to understand the Gini curve, we need to know about the Lorenz curve. What does this Lorenz curve give? The Lorenz curve gives you the percentage of population which holds the percentage of income. And in an ideal scenario, we know that if the Lorenz curve is something like this, it is a perfectly equal society or a perfectly equal country, which does not happen. So, the area below this Lorenz curve plus the pink area that is given here, if we find this particular ratio where this particular area by the sum of these two areas, it gives you the Gini coefficient. And this Gini coefficient is the measure of inequality in a country. So I'm quite sure from economy, you know that if the Gini value is 0, it means perfect equal society. If it is 1, it is highly unequal society, right? This is just a recap of whatever you have studied before, although we are not going deeper into this. But I have a query for those aspirants who are preparing for civil service examination or any other competitive exam where economic questions appear. Do let me know in the comment section, can a Gini value be more than 1? Is it possible? And if yes, do give me the reason also so that others can also learn. So let's get back to our graph and let's talk about this particular curve. Now in this particular curve, you see a lot of pointers and the countries, and if I draw a line here, you'll see that some countries are above and below. The countries which are at the bottom here, they are the good countries in terms of the Great Gatsby curve. That means Here inequality is less, so people have intergenerational parity. Now, what is this Great Gatsby curve all about in a nutshell? If I have to simply tell you what is this Great Gatsby curve, it illustrates the connection between income inequality, that means concentration of wealth in one generation, and the ability of the next generation to catch up with the previous generation, that means with their parents. Now, in simplest of terms, how hard it is for a child to overcome their parents' income level. This is basically the measure of the Great Gatsby curve. I told you the intergenerational immobility. Let me show you the mobility curve. If I just reverse it, you get the mobility curve also. That means if I talk about the Gini coefficient, not the Gini index, then I get the number of generations in which I get equality, or in a number of generation where I move from low income group to an average income group. Let me just give you an example, right? Let me take my own example. See, I remember my great grandfather. He was a farmer. He had just a few acres of land. So low income group. My grandfather more or less continued the same tradition, maybe increased the land by a few acres. But when it comes to my father, he became educated. My uncle also got educated. He got MA history. My father is LLB. He's an advocate. So slowly and steadily, the number of generations needed from moving to low income group to higher income group. You can see here three generation, and the fourth generation now. My brother is a double graduate. I am a double graduate. So in terms of education, also the educational level is increasing. The income is also increasing slowly, steadily. So I can tell that in four generations we have moved from a low income group to a lower middle class group. So this particular Great Gatsby curve, it basically tells you how many generations are needed to reach from a low income group to an average income group. And if you look at the countries which are doing well in terms of inequality, especially the Nordic countries, there you see hardly two generations or little more than two generations are needed to get out of the low income group. But in the movie, you must have seen what happened with Great Gatsby, what happened with Leonardo DiCaprio. Just in one generation, he moved from low income group to a high income group. But that doesn't happen often with the entire population. So the Great Gatsby curve, it basically gives you the number of generations that are needed to move from low income group to upper income group, or how quickly the children are able to reach to their parents' income level, or how better the educational mobility is there in different generations. Now, with respect to the Gini coefficient, if you talk about educational mobility, we see again the same thing, that is the next generation able to educate themselves better than their previous generations. I hope this is clear for you from this particular discussion. Now, if I talk about India, where does India come? India has approximately 0.33 Gini coefficient, a little higher than that also, but we approximately need about 6 generation to reach to the higher level. The same applies to immobility also. So what our discussion today pertains to is that, are we moving from here towards the top of the curve? Let me take you to the original curve first up. Now in this particular curve, we are somewhere just below China here. We are moving towards the Latin American countries, and there is a big threat towards that. Now let me just explain to you what is the problem if we move towards these Latin American countries. So the big question in front of us, is India moving towards the Latin American countries? Perhaps yes, but what is the problem if we move towards these Latin American countries? Isn't it? So let's talk about this. See, this is the national debt. I'm telling about debt in general, public debt plus private debt. And if you look at the numbers, Indian debt is continuously increasing. And what is this concept of debt? The debt taken by this generation, it has to be paid by the next generation, perhaps the next generation. This connects to the intergenerational parity. And if we take higher debt today, if you look at the predictions here from 2020, all these are predictions made by IMF, International Monetary Fund, and our national debt is going to rise more and more till 2025, perhaps even after that. That means if today's generation is taking more and more debt, who is going to pay that? Our children will pay it, our grandchildren will pay it, and that is why they will find very tough for themselves to gain parity with us, isn't it? That is the meaning of the Great Gatsby curve. I hope you understand that why it is a huge problem if there is more and more inequality in the country, if there are problems of poverty, unemployment in a nation, then we are moving in the wrong direction. Now, national debt is one of the reasons, but if we talk about rising debt plus the other causes, the first thing is lower growth rate since 2015. We all know that the GDP growth has been lower. If the GDP growth is lower, then we are looking at the problems of rising unemployment and rising inequality. Now, if this happens, then how is the growth pushed in India? The growth is pushed through public consumption. Now, all these things are connected. Let me tell you how. See, if there is unemployment, then there is very low private investment. If there is inequality, large proportion of population is not able to invest in the economy. They are not able to start a business. They are not able to contribute towards the growth of economy. But how is the economy running? The economy is running purely on the basis of government spending or the public consumption. That means the government is increasing their debt and they are funding the growth. It leads to more and more problems. So private investment is less, public consumption is more and more, coupled with low growth rate, and the problems of COVID-19 pandemic. All these lead to one particular thing, that we are moving towards the Latin American countries on this great Gatsby curve. And if we move higher towards the Latin American countries, what is the problem? See, if we move higher towards them, we are going to get stuck there, and we are looking at more and more populist governments, more and more authoritarian governments, which is a trend in Latin America, isn't it? But what is needed today? Economists in India, they need to look at the great Gatsby curve and where does India stand here, because the COVID-19 pandemic, it is leading to more and more inequality. It is going to create higher intergenerational parity and low intergenerational mobility, which is going to take India towards these Latin American countries. But we are still in a safe zone. It's not late. If the policy makers, if the fiscal policy makers, they plan in better ways such that there is higher expenditure, yes, agreed, because in a times of recession, in a times of slowdown, the government spending has to go up, the public consumption has to go up, yes, but revenue raising measures should also be enhanced. Apart from that, we need to invest more and more in school education. We saw that how inequality and education are connected. So spend more and more on education, spend more and more on creating labor intensive and value adding employment in India, because as employment increases, people will themselves invest more in economy. So public consumption will go down, eventually public debt will go down, and the GDP growth will grow higher. And promote inclusive growth measures in India. All these things are extremely necessary if we are to improve our position on this great Gatsby curve, so that inequality reduces in India and there is good intergenerational parity. That is it from my side on this part of discussion. If you are preparing for UPSC Civil Services examination, this topic becomes very important for you. For instance, say a simple MCQ may emerge which asks you a question about what is a great Gatsby curve, what relation does it give, or from mains perspective, a question might emerge that does India is in a danger zone, that it is reaching towards Latin American countries on the great Gatsby curve. Such questions may emerge, although these are very technical, but nonetheless you need to have knowledge about these. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.